How's it going, everyone? It is Coding Bash, and in this video I'm going to be diving into the code of a Twitter bot application I recently made. I actually made a speed code video for that application, so if you want to check how I actually coded this in real time, you can look at that video. The link will be in the description. But in this video I'm going to be describing pretty much the idea itself, then also how I implemented that idea. So what I created was a Twitter bot, and this is just something I did for fun for a couple days, nothing really serious. But what this bot does is if you tweet at this Twitter account or this Twitter bot, it will pretty much reply with a random internet joke, or in other words, a random meme. And you can also subscribe to this bot by tweeting the word sub, and then every day you will receive a random internet joke. And then you can also unsubscribe by tweeting the words unsub. But for an actual demo, if you look right here on the right side, here are your mentions tab. So as you can see, Serge, he tweeted at the bot with the word sub, and then what the bot does is it first adds this account to the database, right? And for the database, I use MongoDB. It adds his account to the database and pretty much says he is subscribed. So if you go on the left side, this is our database console, and you can see that Serge is actually within the database, right? And he is set to true for subscribed. So after that, I then respond to Serge with a confirmation message saying you are now subscribed, right? And then every once a day, I think I have it set to actually 4 times a day. So every 4 times a day, it will send all our subscribers, which you can see on the left side, it will send them a tweet, which actually pretty recently is sent the whole new batch. So if you look up, we have 7 minutes ago, it just sent all the tweets to our subscribers. So as you can see here on the right side, we have all those tweets. And then also, without the subscription, we have another feature where you can just reply to it or send a tweet and then we'll reply with a random joke. And that can be demoed here by this tweet right here. And if you look at the response, we replied with a random joke. Okay, so that's pretty much it for the bot. If you want to check it out, you can check out this bot by his Twitter handle, which is AskMeBot, or the link will be in the description. And next, I will just describe how I actually coded this. So if you go into the interactive development environment, or IDE, I don't know why I said the whole thing, I use Spring Tool Suite. Spring Tool Suite is a Eclipse-based IDE that provides extra functionalities for the Spring framework. And what the Spring framework is actually what I used to create this application. The Spring framework is just framework around the Java programming language, so you can just build the Java applications easier with the framework. So, like I said, I use Java, I use the Spring Boot framework, and for the Twitter functionality, I use Spring Social Twitter, which is a Spring project. And what Spring Social Twitter does is a Java, or in other words, a Spring abstraction around the Twitter REST API. And what the Twitter REST API is it's a REST web service API that was created by Twitter that provides a bunch of web endpoints to do Twitter operations, such as sending a tweet or following another Twitter account, stuff like that. Stuff you would normally do on Twitter. Spring Social Twitter is just a programmatic Java abstraction around that web service, and that's what I use to do all my Twitter functionalities. For cloud deployment, I use Heroku. For data storage, like I said, I use MongoDB. For version control, I use Git, and that should be all the technologies that I use to create this application. So to start out, the first problem that I had to solve in the Twitter bot was, okay, so how can my application be notified whenever I retrieve or the bot receives a new mention? So you would think that the Twitter REST API provided some sort of webhook or streaming endpoint that would let the application know when a mention has been retrieved. So I did check on that, and I didn't see any endpoint that provided that functionality. So what I had to do is use the standard Twitter REST API. They actually contain an endpoint to retrieve all your mentions. So what I have to do is just call that endpoint a bunch of times and see if there were any new mentions within the last time that I called it, right? So it's a really inefficient way. I wish the Twitter API had something to where you can stream for events or be notified like a webhook for events. Unfortunately, they didn't have it, so I had to do this implementation. So here's the code on how I did that. If you look at this method, so right here we have a scheduler, which is something that Spring Boot Frame provides. So a scheduler will pretty much just call this method right here, retrieve mentions trigger. It will call that method within a certain interval. And I set that interval within the fixed delay parameter right up here. So it's max wait response time in milliseconds, which is 30 seconds or 30,000 milliseconds. So every 30 seconds, it will call this method. That's pretty much what it is. And within this method, the first actual code that we do is line 80, which is, well, let's retrieve the mentions, all the new mentions we got. So if you go into this, so if you open up the implementation, we have the retrieve mentions method. And within this method, we pretty much, the first thing we do is to check for if we exceeded a rate limit. And if you aren't familiar with rate limiting for APIs, pretty much some APIs that's provided by like Twitter, Facebook, their own APIs, they have a limit onto how often you can call their API, their service. So pretty much in this method, so I can actually go into it real quick. In this method, I essentially just I called Twitter. I called the Twitter object that's provided by Spring Source for Twitter. So on line 44, I call and retrieve the rate limit status. I determine if it's close to the rate limit. See if it's close to the rate limit. And if it is close to the rate limit or it exceeded the rate limit, I pretty much make the program go to sleep. I make it go to sleep until the time to where the rate limit has refreshed. So that's just what I did for that. And if you go back, so after it checks the rate limit, it then actually retrieves the mentions. So it retrieves it from the last mention that I retrieved to the newest ones, which is what's implemented on line 42 to 44. And then I just do that stuff, and then I just return the list of mentions. So if you go back to the scheduler, right here, we're back to the scheduler. Once I had the list of mentions, I remove the duplicates, which is shown on line 81, and then I next process those mentions. So you retrieve the mentions, you now want to operate on those mentions. So if you go into process mentions, that's shown on line 26 on the right side, the response processor, which I have highlighted. So what this does is it iterates through all the mentions. So for each mention within the mentions list, it then checks a message and see if it contains the word sub. If it contains the word sub, it's going to call this line. If it contains the word unsub, it's going to call this line, which is pretty much unsubscribing, and the first one is subscribing. But if it doesn't contain the word sub and it doesn't contain the word unsub, then it's going to go onto the default operation, which is just sending that person a random joke. So we will start with these two first. So the subscription and unsubscription. So pretty much how I did it is I use the same method for it called create subscription action confirm response. I don't know why I called it that. But then I sent it the mention that I retrieved from Twitter. And then I also sent an indicator on whether I want to subscribe or do not want to subscribe. So I can see when I do want to subscribe, I send the value true. When I don't want to subscribe, or in other words, unsubscribe, I send the value false. So if you go into this method, I do all my subscription logic. So right here, we have the first thing that we do is, well, you want to subscribe to this person. So to subscribe or unsubscribe, I'll call this method called the register subscription status. And in this method, we pretty much, the first thing we do is we see if there's an account in our database, right? If this is a new user, he won't have an account. If he's been a user, he will have an account in the database. So we do that. And then if the account is null, or in other words, if the account is not in Mongo, so a new user, then we create a new account with a true subscription status, which isn't always true. It's just what we retrieve from the method, but we set it to the new subscription status. So if there's no account, we create the account. So that's what we do here. So account, new account, set points, set subscribe, all that stuff, right? And then if the account is still null after we saved the account in Mongo, well, that means there was an error. So we return a result of registration error. Now, if the account is already in the database, now we just have to update the subscription status. So if I actually pull up the database right now, so here's the database. Here is pretty much what's stored in the Mongo database. We have a subscription status, right? Which for Surge, right here, Surge, it's true. But if you want to unsubscribe, we have to set that to false, which is what we do in this else block. So, if I can highlight, nope, not that much. Nope. For some reason that's not working. But if the account's in Mongo, and if he wants to so what this block does is if his status is going to be the same as when we update it. So for example, he subscribed and then he asked to be subscribed again. Then in that situation, we just return the result of no action necessary because he's already subscribed, or vice versa. If he's unsubscribed and he wants to unsubscribe again, it's already done. You don't have to do anything. So that's what we do in this if block. And then here in this else block, we pretty much this is pretty much when we actually update the database. So if he subscribed and he wants to unsubscribe, we go to this block, or vice versa. If he's unsubscribed and he wants to subscribe, then we call this block here. So we just set the account, we set the subscription to whatever he wants to change to, and then we save. So that's line 77, and that's pretty much how we do subscription logic, right? So that's subscription. If you go back to the responder, it then creates a confirmation tweet, right? Construct subscription reply tweet right here. So that's actually constructing the message that appears, and this is created right here. So pretty much we just take the result from the subscription, if you remember, and if the action was success, then pretty much you are subscribed or you are now unsubscribed, depending on what you want to do. If no action was necessary, then it will be like you're already subscribed or you are already unsubscribed. And just if there was an error in registration, then we return an error, so unable to subscribe or unable to unsubscribe, right? So that is pretty much actually before we head on. So after we created the payload, the tweet data payload or the tweet, we then have to send it over. And what I did for that was I used a queue, and why I used a queue was for rate limit avoidance. So if you recall, many REST APIs have some sort of measures to prevent people from using their APIs too much, and this is called a rate limit. So I use a queue to be able to manage that better. All right, so I just send it to the queue, and if you go into the input-output scheduler, this is the scheduler method that will pretty much take that queue, take whatever's first in it, and send that tweet over to Twitter. So if you look here, we get the payload from Twitter. We get the payload from the queue, right? Because so a queue is first in, first out. So you add something in, and then something takes it out. So pretty much what's adding it in is what we did here. So we created a tweet, now we're adding it into the queue, and then what this method is doing is now we're taking the first in, first out, we're taking that tweet out. And then what we do with that tweet is we're now sending it over to Twitter. So that's what we're doing in this method. So we take the first line, line 59, we take the tweet out, and then we check if the limiter permits, and the limiter is just another extra measure to ensure that I'm not, abusing the Twitter call. I'm not sending a bunch of tweets in a very short amount of time just because I don't want to get rate limited. So I pretty much have a limiter, and then I send a tweet, right? And I have two implementations of the tweet sender. So if we just click here and so I have an interface called meme sender, and I have two implementations. If you look on the left side, a development implementation and a production implementation. So I will use a development implementation if I'm in my development environment, or in other words, if I'm working, if this code is being ran on my computer. it's going to use this implementation, which is pretty much just going to print it out to the console. But if I am in the production environment, so this code is not running on my computer, but it's running on Heroku, the cloud computer, then it's going to use the this implementation. And this won't just print it out to the console, it's actually going to, send it over to tweet. It's actually going to do the operation. Just because I did this, because when I'm testing, when I'm developing, I don't want to send a bunch of test tweets out, right, that may or may not work. So I want to have two separate implementations to be able to test that. So in the production implementation, I pretty much just get the tweet, and I set all the statuses, all the resources, and then line 40, I send the tweet to Twitter. Pretty much that this line right here is the line that sends your tweet to Twitter. So that is pretty much everything to do with subscription. But that's for subscribing or unsubscribing, right? Now we want to talk about, okay, so you have all the subscribers, how are you going to send, a bunch of jokes to them on an interval, right? So if you go back to the Twitter client, so shoot, someone unsubbed. No. See, so this is the unsubscription, right? Someone responded with unsub, and we respond with you're now unsubscribed. So if you go back to the database, you can see that. And if you so right here we have so this is tail, right? He was true or subscribed. Now if you refresh, he's now false. You see that? Because he unsubscribed. So just like a real-time demo of that. But when I do send a bunch of tweets out to my subscribers, this is what it looks like. So you can see Serge was subscribed, this guy was subscribed, so I sent him a tweet. This guy, I just send him a bunch of tweets at a certain time each day. And let me show you how I did that. So if I go back and I go to the subscription scheduler, so here we have another scheduler method. So pretty much every interval is going to call this method, except it's not really an interval. It uses a cron job, and a cron job is, if you're unfamiliar with like Linux-based systems or Unix or whatever it is, crons are used for scheduling in a certain second, minute, day, month, or year, right? So it's not intervals, but it's by like certain cases. So right here, the cron job is actually this is the cron query, and pretty much what this means is, okay, so we're gonna call this method in the 0th second, the 0th minute, at 9 a.m., 12 a.m., 3 a.m., which is 15 in military time, and 3 a.m. and 5 a.m. No. Let me say that again. 9 a.m., 12 a.m., 3 p.m., and 5 p.m. And then of every year, of every month, and of every year, pretty much. So it's pretty much going to call this method at 9 a.m., 12 a.m., 3 p.m., and 5 p.m. every day, right? So when it does that, it's pretty much going to retrieve all the accounts that was in the repository in the Mongo database. So it's going to do that. And pretty much for each subscriber, it is going to create a response, right? And pretty much here is just going to just create the payload and add it to the queue. And then pretty much the other scheduler I have to take out of the queue is going to send that over to Twitter. So you can see kind of like the whole flow of this, right? And yeah, that's pretty much everything to do with the subscription feature. For the regular, just you tweet at my account and then he replies with a random joke. For that regular feature, it's really simple. It's a lot simpler than the subscription, but pretty much whenever if you go to the processor, this will just do the same thing that this does. As you can see, it's the same method. It's just going to send them a random joke. Except for this, it just does it to all their subscribers. And that's pretty much my whole application from top to bottom. There are some small details I just intentionally cut out just because it's too much detail. I probably went over my that limit. But that's pretty much everything to do with my account. Hopefully it made sense. It really depends on if you're familiar with like schedulers and web development and all that stuff. But hopefully it was very interesting, right? And if you want to see the speed code for this, which is where I code this in real time and it's just sped up a bunch, I do have a video for that, and I'll have the link in the description. If you want to see more videos like this, or if you want to see more speed codes, then make sure you subscribe. Then I also have a Twitter, which is @codingbash, that you can follow if you have a Twitter account too, that you can follow to see any sort of coding updates I have. And then if you want to check out this bot, it's also on Twitter. The handle is AskMeBot. I'll have all the links for those in the description. Make sure you check it out. And once again, thank you guys so much for watching. Bye-bye.